Morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to a working lunch with Nordin. Today, we're very fortunate to have Angela with us all the way from Australia, from Sydney, Australia. Thank you, Angela, for joining us today.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you. It feels a little bit normal, you being out at a restaurant.
Look at that. Humans. Yeah, they're real humans out here with us today. We in Malaysia have gone kind of, we're getting back to quote unquote normal. Numbers have dropped down. Vaccinations are up over 90%. I think the first dose number is about 95% almost. I think today we'll hit 95%.
Fantastic.
So we really pushed it hard here in Malaysia. But what's the situation in Sydney right now? We see so much on the news here, Sydney, Melbourne, but what's going on in your neck of the woods?
So unfortunately, Nordin, Australia is a little bit of an embarrassment, I think, around the world, because we've got several states all behaving very differently. We've got some states in Australia like WA and Western Australia and Queensland who've had very, very low COVID issues, so have essentially remained quite open, but have shut their borders to their own people. So, us as Australians, we can't move from state to state. We haven't even been able to move within our own states because of our prolonged lockdowns. I understand one of our states, Victoria, holds the world record on being locked down for the longest amount of time, which is stunning, really, for a Western country to be stifling its own citizens so much. So while we've reached double dose vaccinations in New South Wales or Sydney, Greater Sydney, still the rest of our country is lagging very much behind. We assume we'll have 90-95% by December double vaccinated, but again, only in one state, not the whole of Australia. So I think we're still going to be seeing very tough times in Australia.
Okay. And is that, New South Wales, of course, is a state where Sydney is in. New South Wales looks like it's taking the lead in terms of getting the numbers, the COVID numbers down and the vaccinations up. Why do you think that is happening in a different way in New South Wales than the other states?
So I think because we suffered quite quickly with the Delta strain spreading so fast in Sydney, and the fact that we kept building to more and more cases every day. And of course, we got quite fearful here in Australia because we never really built in a plan B. We kind of assumed that we would always have zero, or we would always be able to wipe it out. We didn't try and have what if scenario. Suddenly we got Delta, even though we knew the rest of the world was having it. We didn't manage our quarantine very well. So all of those things kind of came together at a nexus where the only tool we had was to then proceed to vaccinations. We stuffed that up as well. Our government didn't buy enough soon enough. So we lagged behind in that. We picked up a bit of momentum. New South Wales is leading the way. But again, it's a matter of how we acted, Nordin, because New South Wales itself needed vaccines from other states in Australia to beef up our vaccination rate because we had the most infections. Now that's spread to other states. It's a bit like chicken and egg. We're getting there as one single state, but we're still very lagging behind in the other states. And that's the messaging. That's the different type of leadership. If you will, it's a different business plan for each capital city in each state in Australia. And as you and I both know, when you have a big company that has smaller companies within it, if you're not all on the same page, if you're not all driving the same message, if you're not all on board, then clearly you're not going to do as well. So a country is no different to a business.
Interesting. One of the things that I see a couple of good questions popping up now as well.
Yeah, and a shout out to people that know me that are watching. Thank you, Anne.
Exactly, and Anne is also one of our big fans, hopefully. One of the things that Anne was asking about is, of course, the Premier has changed in New South Wales. and he's talking also interestingly about immigration at a time like this. I want to kind of link immigration and business now, because your area is SMEs, and you've really made a name for yourself in that area. What do you see as the future of the SME business post COVID-19, or we're still not able to talk about post COVID-19? What is the game plan there?
So we know the data's showing that unemployment or employment, we've got vacancies of around 20% that we're missing because we've shut down the borders. So we're not having as many people come in. We haven't had students come in or backpackers. So we're really lacking in the employment market. And immigration is really going to be the only other key way of getting enough people into the country in order to just get staffing levels back up so we can aid recovery. And SMEs are going to feel that pinch more than anything, because a lot of their casual workforce has been in the SME market. And of course, that market that used to fund or propel all of that was our students, our backpackers, our travellers, and of course, our specialist labour forces, where we were perhaps sponsoring them for 3 or 4 year visas. So immigration is going to play a key part. But again, we're still going to come back to the same story, Nordin. How has our infrastructure developed enough to support a big push for immigration? And the answer is no. Our own government has cut back on immigration in the last few years. I think reduced it to about 140,000 a year. That's going to be a great disappointment because, as you know, we're not a big population country. We're not big on manufacturing. The products or skills that we have aren't exactly geared for high employment here. So we need to scale. And the only way to do that is to have more people, because that drives the economy. So if the government's not prepared to provide the infrastructure to do that, then we're not going to be able to support more people coming into Australia. And we all know that Australia was built on the back of immigrants. And, you know, my family, I'm first generation born here. My family came in the 50s and 60s. We've had immigration here in Australia back to the 1800s, if we go back even further from the English colonies. But Australia is what it is today because of our diverse culture and the fact that immigrants have come here seeking a better life. Unfortunately, our government's not on the same page.
Yeah, now, I think this is one area that we talk about immigration, and then you've shifted also into looking at infrastructure. One of the things that we see here in Asia, which is driving exports, especially exports of services, is digital infrastructure. Where does Australia sit in this digital infrastructure paradigm? Are we shifting fast enough in a way that we're able to export more services, especially in the SME sector?
I think COVID's done one particular thing, and that's shine a light on the fact that digital transformation in Australia has been just 2 words, not exactly a movement or a true strategy for many businesses. So COVID showed us that we were lagging in our digital transformation strategies. First of all, our connectivity. You know, do I need to say anything else? If you don't have a good connectivity infrastructure, and our national broadband network, which we call here NBN, is unfortunately not available to every Australian and all businesses. Australia is a very large country. We're a big land mass. We have great distances between everything. Connectivity should have been a priority. So if we can't even have good connectivity for our businesses, how on earth can we truly perform digital transformation? And off the back of that, we've got data that shows 60% of SMEs still don't even have a website presence. So if you don't have connectivity, you don't have a website presence, you can't transform digitally, how on earth are you going to be able to export services around the globe? And then let's use another buzzword, resilience. How can we be resilient and build for our plan B if we have no connectivity, no digital transformation, no online presence? So it really is an area that needs to be worked on. COVID showed how slow we've been. It also showed how fast we could pivot and adapt, but not fast enough.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, I recently saw a New South Wales government report on export numbers and SMEs that export. And if I remember correctly, it's only 3% of SMEs now are exporting. I mean, for me, I see that as a massive opportunity for growth. And looking at what a recovery looks like, how are SMEs going to move digitally and rapidly into this idea of, okay, let's export into ASEAN or Asia, for example, where we are here?
Well, that's a great question off the back of a horrifying statistic. I mean, you mentioned, the data saying 3%. That's horrifying. It's not even really a blip when you look at data and you pull apart numbers, right? It would almost sit in the zero category of data. So what we're seeing here is that while COVID showed us that we really needed to pick up speed in order to be able to work from home, so those kind of productivities and structures, I'm very surprised and disappointed that our SME market didn't pick up straight away, that we need to scale, and the only way we can scale is to expand our markets. And we have to expand our markets outside of Australia. When you consider that Asia is very close, the physical distance with Australia, you also understand that, while we want to sell our products here at home, competition-wise, we need to change the way we think. So selling to a new market in Asia where there are millions, 10, 20, 30 times more people and a bigger market than there is in Australia seems like a no-brainer, Nordin, but we haven't adapted. So either SMEs have got blinders on and don't understand the opportunities and the financial growth that is available to them just by expanding overseas, or we have a fear of growing and investing, which again goes against the data that shows we have a very low level of entrepreneurship here in Australia. So I'm going to have to say that it appears that most of our SMEs here are in fact not the kind of businesses that could export, or they don't realise that they actually do have goods or services that are ideal for the Asian market. I mean, I'm sure you would agree, Australian products come with a high trust brand rating. They come with a high skilled level rating. We have the perception of delivering good quality. So what's stopping us? Hard to say.
Am I okay? I'm unmuted now. No, apologies there. One of the things that we did was during this COVID-19, because we do a lot of work on social media and social media data, we saw a very interesting trend around Australian, when talk in social media around Australian products trends. And even during the lockdowns here, it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Data showed that the Australian products were trending over the weekends. Why? Because a lot of people who studied and worked in Australia came back here, and then they said, okay, we want to go out and enjoy some good Australian products. I won't mention what they are, but you can guess what they were doing on the weekend. But this is actually an opportunity because so many people studied in Australia, so many people have lived in Australia. There's this massive market of in a sense, Australian-ready consumers here in Asia that are just say, hey, send us your good stuff. We want to get our hands on it. One of the things that I wanted to ask you though, Angela, was now the issues around China. Everyone keeps talking about, if you watch the news, China dominates the airways. But why are we not talking about the rest of Asia, or ASEAN for that matter? One, it's closer. Two, there's a lot more cultural and educational ties that I talked about. And countries like Malaysia, Singapore, who are part of the Commonwealth, have these amazing linkages that we can, Australians, and I'm of course an Australian here in Asia, have benefited from this amazing linkages. Why do you see that kind of that apprehension to step out into Asia? Is there a comfort zone in Australia, or what do you see?
I think we unfortunately are a culture here in Australia that is very isolated. So because our big distances, even though Asia and Malaysia is closer than the rest of the world, we still see ourselves as quite far and quite isolated. And we forget, I think, we think the bubble revolves just around us here. So I'm trying to be a little bit positive about it, but the reality is that often when you say Asia in Australia, people think of only China. They don't include India. They don't include Malaysia. They don't include Singapore. This is just poor education and not being informed. Of course, there are more markets than just China. And just to very lightly just touch on the whole crisis around China and the bad PR that is happening here in Australia, this is government to government. It's not business to business. It's not people to people. You know, the Chinese community here in Australia dates back a long way, and they have second and third and fourth generation people born and living here with families. And they also are feeling the brunt of this. So it's really important, I think, Nordin, to draw the distinction of when governments behave badly, that's not the will of the people necessarily. And I'm very happy to blame both governments equally. I think they've both behaved like toddlers, if you will, like young children. They've spat the dummy, they're having a little fight. It's now flowing on to the economics between the countries, and that's bad business. And government should know better than to do that. So I would hold them equally responsible. But it's very disappointing at the same time that the Australian market doesn't recognise the scale that there is in Malaysia. You know, that is also a very big area. You know, in Australia, we have 25 million people. Only about 12 to 15 million are actually consumers, if you remove children and the elderly, or take all of those bits out. We can't scale here, Nordin. It's very clear, right? You're not going to be able to scale. I remember in my early days in hospitality, we used to have to buy a lot of our product, packaging, cups, etc., from overseas. We had to import them. We didn't even make them here in Australia. And even when we do manufacture here, it's at such high cost. And I know we've had some comments, just some people commenting on the cost of digital transformation in Australia is very high. Yes, that's why we go offshore for a lot of things. So you would think that we would do more than just buy cheaper services for our own businesses here. You'd think we would understand that we need to scale and export to whole other markets. So maybe that's something you should change too, Nordin. Maybe it's something you need to build.
Exactly. I like it when you give me more responsibility. And I think this is one of the things that we, of course, part of the Malaysia-Australia Business Council, are very much excited about welcoming more business from Australia here. And we see also the reverse. A lot of Malaysian companies looking to invest into Australia, especially the property sector. That has by large, been growing. But it's unfortunate, if you ask me. A lot of that has been going into cities further south of Sydney. Now, you are also playing an important role in the city of Sydney itself. Tell us a little bit about your role there as a councillor, and what's going on with your little campaign to take a bigger step yourself.
Yes, so I am politically active. Apart from being a champion of small business owners or SMEs, I'm also I'm an elected person. So I'm a City of Sydney councillor on the City of Sydney Council, which happens to be one of the biggest councils in Australia, of course. We all know that Sydney is the pseudo capital city of Australia. Not the real one on the map is Canberra, but we think everything revolves around Sydney. And we have local elections coming up in December here in all of New South Wales, but in particular Sydney. And I've put my hand up to be the next Lord Mayor of Sydney, which I think, what I bring to the table is, 35 years of business experience. And I think that running Sydney is very much not just about business, but it's good to have that additional skill. So I've been championing the cause of small business now for a decade, very active politically, understanding that government in general has never really understood the mindset of an SME or a small business owner. They look at us and they think, oh yeah, you're an entrepreneur or a startup. We're not a label. We have lots of different businesses. We all have a very similar attitude, and that is a high work ethic, and we want to succeed. Those are great characteristics to have in any job. But in particular, I think if you bring that to the political table and you add in there, in that recipe, being conscious of people and community and the roles that small business plays and how we feed into everything, I think it's that empathy to do better and to want more for your own people. That's what I'm going along. I've also spent a decade working out, I think, and this is going to be a benchmark of something to say, but I think I've worked out finally where government's getting it wrong and how they're not delivering for people. So I've decided that my platform should be about reimagining how government works. You know, every problem I've encountered where people come to me and tell me where the system lets them down, it's the way government behaves toward its own people, which is quite ironic when you think about it, Nordin, because from a business perspective, we treat our people, which is the customer, we do everything to make sure the customer experience is great, the customer service is great, that our products and services are of the highest quality, that we deliver every single time. Government doesn't have that attitude. They don't think about their customer. And that's what I think we need to change. So it's become clear with COVID how badly our capital cities have been impacted. You know, as soon as you go into lockdown, they've emptied. We've got a 60% vacancy rate in offices where we don't expect people to come back to even 2 or 3 days a week in the CBDs for another 6 months. That's a long time to rob local economies of that kind of financial injection. So we've got a lot of problems here to deal with in Sydney, a lot to deal with in Australia. What I want to do is make sure that government's aware of these things. In my opinion, they're working in isolated silos. You know, they sit in Parliament House, they think they've come up with a good idea, they never consult, they never ask people first or go to the experienced people in those sectors. They say things, they make a statement, and then they catch up madly to try and fix where other people have poked holes into it. I'm saying that as a business owner, wouldn't it be better to consult first, do the research, do the legwork, ask, and then execute and go forward? I mean, that's where government falls down every time, and not just in Australia, okay?
It's an interesting idea. One of the things that a carpenter would say is, measure twice and cut once.
That's right.
And a lot of of course, the construction sector in Sydney has been hit incredibly hard during this time. What do you see now, though? When we look at the end of this year, hopefully COVID numbers improve throughout Australia. Will there be an uptake in the economy starting next year with tourism starting again? And what are the opportunities to get it right differently than what we had before COVID-19? Is there a role for Sydney, the city, to set an example? Because we see Sydney as always in the list of top 10 livable cities. How are you going to add on to that? How are you going to improve that gap?
We need to keep one word in mind, and while it's a cheesy current word that's trending, resilience and being resilient should be a huge focus of any government or company. We need to prepare. We might have had a once in a 100-year pandemic, but what's clear to us is that this kind of pandemic situation will happen again. Because we are a global world, because we've got much more mobility and movement than we've had in other generations, it stands clear that we could face pandemic-type situations again and again. And we need to be prepared so that the economic brink or the wall or the cliff that we all came up against or jumped off willingly or not willingly in some cases, we need to ensure that that doesn't happen again. The only way you can do that is to acknowledge the enemy that you're fighting. In this case, it's the virus. Now, the virus comes into a country. How it gets there, the mode of transport that it took. The problem is that our government here didn't have good enough quarantine standards to deal with it as it arrived. So as you know, most governments now around the world are looking at either compulsory vaccination before you enter a country, rapid testing when you're on the plane before you get on, when you get off. But we need to have those tools in our toolkit to make sure that no matter what comes here, we have a way of dealing with it. And then when it's in the community, how do we deal with it then? So shutting down businesses for hundreds of days at a time is not a solution. You know, robbing our tourism industry of the people that economy needs and now has had missing for 20 months or 24 months that it could end up being, that's not a solution. None of what they have been doing is working for the economy. Now, yes, it sounds like a fantasy to say, well, how are we going to make health and the economy work together? I don't think that's rocket science. I don't think so. I think we have the capability in every country to deal with it safely and consistently. That's going to be the key, right? Not mixed messages. So right now in Sydney, we're not sure where we should wear a mask, because if you're outside, you don't need to wear a mask. But if you're inside, you do. But if you're at a restaurant and you're eating and drinking, you can't. We need to have that consistency, right? Pardon me. And we're not. So we've got to have tools. We've got to have a plan B and a plan C, because business does. So government needs to put them in action and have us follow.
Nice, nice. One of the things I want to ask you as well, get some water, because you've been doing all the talking today, which is always great, because I always love listening to your ideas. And one of the things that, you'll be happy to know that we do get the ABC, and every once in a while we get to watch the drum, and I know you're on the drum at least a couple times a month. So we do get your ideas over here as well. But one of the things I wanted to shift gears now, and we often talk about critical communities. We often talk about those people most impacted during a crisis. What I want to ask you about is, how have women been impacted during this COVID-19 pandemic in Australia, and specifically in Sydney?
So again, the data's not good there. Women have been the highest segment that's been impacted in terms of everyday COVID. Ironically, though, we've had more male deaths than female deaths. So not sure what the takeaway is from that, but we've had increase in domestic violence. That stands to reason because of the stress, Nordin. You know, people are in isolation, they're home, they're not seeing their friends and family, they're not reacting well, people have lost their jobs. So all of this comes together. Our mental health issues, suicide rates have gone up. It's been horrible. Women have lost their jobs. Homeschooling. Oh my God, it's crazy. And I'm going to cough again. I'm so sorry.
Let me take the. No worries. Let me take the.
Oh, I think it's the subject. It really has been horrible.
It is an emotional. Yeah, it is an emotional subject, and one of the things that we've seen, throughout the world is this idea of those who have been impacted the most, and for me, the mental health issues that have impacted women, because they play such an important role in the family, whether it's Australia or here in Asia, that if we don't look at taking care of these most vulnerable within the community, within the family, within society, it's going to be what I would say is a long tail pandemic, a long tail crisis that we're going to continue to have to face, because these issues aren't going to go away. While yes, today we're out having a lunch in a restaurant today, the mental health impact has remained for many people, and will do so. We're talking about post-traumatic stress syndrome here on a mass basis. What do you see possible for, in a sense, for Australia, and what leadership role can be set there, and how we deal with these people?
So we hear from the health sector referred to something called long COVID, which is if you do get COVID-19, you can have long-term effects of the virus impacting you. And long COVID will impact us in other ways, as you've brought up, this long tail of the culmination and the accumulation of the past 20 months, which, you know, we're nearly at the end of 2021 anyway, so we might as well start calling it 2 years. And what you'll have had is women being out of the workforce, and in terms of Australia specifically, not having superannuation. So if you're not working and you're not getting super, you're impacting, you know, 2 years out of the workforce, could be more, you're impacting later on in life, which is going to be a problem. We know now that women of around about the age of 65 are the new poverty level, because they've come out of broken marriages. They haven't been in the workforce much because they've been going in and out because of their kids. They don't have money to retire on. They're homeless. All of these vulnerable sectors that maybe we didn't have 10 or 20 years ago. The mental health, you're not just going to switch that all back on, Nordin, just because we've opened up. You're at a restaurant this week. You know, I'm going out for a drink tonight with friends. Just because we've suddenly turned that corner doesn't immediately wipe away the impacts of the last 20 months. You know, I'm home alone. I've really struggled, and I'm busy. You know, I've got 1,000 things to do every day. And I found in the last month, I was really struggling to get motivated. And for me, that's a huge danger. That's the telltale sign that I'm not happy. You know, I miss my baby nieces. You know, I miss hugging my mum. I miss fighting with my brother face to face. You know, there's nothing like that interaction. And that's the mild form of mental health. Now let's add those business owners who can only see despair. I don't want to talk negative, but let's talk reality. We've got data here in Australia that shows that our small business owners have increased their debt anywhere between $100,000 to $300,000 in the last 24 months on top of what they already owed. People are going to lose their homes. They're going to lose their businesses. The next 24 months are going to show the real impact of COVID, not the short term right now. It's going to be that long term. So that's why we need to build up resilience. That's why we need to scale. That's why we need to look at overseas markets. That's why we need to be exporting. If we're not doing those things, then we can't build a better future, because we have a lot to make up for.
Now, Angela, we've come to the end of our half hour. We could go on for another hour, so long as you're not coughing, you know, because you've got so many good ideas. And this is one of the things that we really appreciate your time today. And we really hope we can get you back on the show again soon. And we really wish you the best in your upcoming campaign and your continued fight to help SMEs throughout the country, but especially up in New South Wales. And I look forward to getting back to Australia, which is a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into.
Are we going to let you back in?
I don't know. I hope. But I'm okay.
I'll call someone.
Call someone. I've got my coffee. I'm here waiting. But
thank you.
But all jokes aside, thank you for your hard work, and we really look forward to seeing how things pan out in Sydney, and we look forward to seeing you again on the Working Lunch with Nordin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.